especially if they're only talking about issue.
Yeah. And our type amendment is, and we type that.
Yeah,
Issue.
that's the
Yeah.
only issue. So we can sort of capitalize from.
Yeah.
I just don't think we can add.
Yeah.
We are, I just got word that Hyperloop people may be a little bit late. Will you be ready to jump to the head of the line?
I wasn't going to be at the end of it.
But you'll make it work at the
That's the
next line.
spirit. That's what we're talking
would
about.
help you out and move your head.
All right, all right. Okay. That's here, Julie's here, Terry's here, 1, 2, 3, 7, 8. Eight's a,
And you can take
that's
that.
right, here comes Roy. We're 9, we have a quorum.
Jim, what do we need for a quorum?
8, 7,
Well, I wrote this falls under your
but we have 9.
Karen, who's our grant writer.
Who gets to write that?
Pardon?
Who writes that?
The whole document?
Well, you know, parts. I was just, when I was reading it,
I'm super
under the
excited.
intro, there was a word missing.
Well, I will
Call me up the words.
Now, Rachel,
And, you know, it's just really small, but,
no, I haven't seen Rachel.
and, it was. The something was, yes, maybe the plan was 6 years out or something. Yeah. That was the only one. That was page 6.
So now is waiting until the morning.
Or tip stuff.
Yeah?
Yeah, shipping his relationship with the contractor and our contractor.
Yeah, I thought, you know, by the time this
It's
goes
a little
through
lot.
everything, the major
Nice that you can prove to the board that you can spell. Things like that, especially with spell checker.
And I didn't go deep into some of the other pages, but I read some of it. Most of it, which was the drawing. Finding kids were out. Yeah.
Yes, especially at 5 o'clock. Luckily, I have a meeting downtown at about 6:40, so I'm going to go visit a friend and then stay down here. So it worked out well. So. Freeway, so really easy to go. It takes me from there.
Well, one section is
So you the freeway.
Yeah.
before you get to the sign. The arch
Well, see, I live in the southeast part of Glenwood. I live on the side. So I would hit Woodman and we're gonna end.
It's getting shorter and shorter every time.
The other
Like people do this to me. I have issues. I can't keep them. Hi, Pilari. Good. Yeah, I think Deb sent an email at some point and she's like, we're just not gonna. She's telling us to agree on that or something, but I forget what it was. It's like, she doesn't follow all of it. Submitting your report. So people should still be able to work. Hey, Jim. And Gary's like, I live in a water district. You know, she named somebody. She's not a huge fan of him. I love him. Walter Lawson or somebody who wants to originate from.
Give people the option, I guess.
Yeah, she's thinking that maybe people could transfer them. Like, right.
But generally she was not, I mean,
Yeah, I think so. We were like, this is what we want. We're she's on the radar. She'll mention there. I think we're trying to change this. Yeah.
it's not that, it's me.
Happy New Year. I agree. And I had a birthday, so you know. I know, 1 year older.
1 year younger.
There you go.
In attitude, if not in material.
That's fine, we understand, and Kevin's gonna be a little late. Wonderful.
Just like those were beautiful. My wife.
10 silver.
Oh.
Yeah.
I know, it really is, but it's, yeah, I know, okay, just in case.
I have rosacea, and we're trying to make sure.
Okay, it is 3 o'clock on that clock, so we'll go by that clock
Very
today.
good.
And we'll call the meeting to order. This is the Community Advisory Committee of the Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments. And we'll greet you all and say we have a quorum. And so we'll start with introductions, and I'm Jim Moore, at-large member. And we'll go
Michelle
to-
Day, at large. Courtney Stone, citizen at large.
Hal Moffett, El Paso County.
Ellen Hasse, Teller County.
Sharon Brown, Fountain. Kim Mutchler, at large. Julie Ott, Legal Women Voters. Carly Hawk, Colorado Springs Chamber, UBC. Aubrey Day, at large.
John DeVoe, Woodland Park.
Roy Rosenthal, Management Springs.
Jessica McClellan with PPACG.
And at our staff table. Thank you. And we'll be hearing from Ken shortly, I think. Consent items, we are still waiting for the Hyperloop folks. Apparently they're not moving as fast as their project. So that we will adjust the agenda accordingly, and we will take up item 5A in lieu of 4A when we get there. So with that amendment, I will accept a motion. Not yet. Relax, Ken. I know you're excited to come up here and talk about this. I will accept a motion to approve the consent agenda, or the consent, items as amended.
So moved.
And second, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. Public comments?
No public.
No public comments. All right. Now, Ken. We will go to action item 5A, the FY 2019-2022 tip release for public comment. And that is in your packet, should be in your packet or on your computer. It's a small book.
Thank you and good afternoon. I am Ken Prather, PPACG Transportation. For those of you who have not been here 4 years ago, a Transportation Improvement Program, or TIP, is a funding document of For us now, it's going to be a 4-year document. Federal minimum is 4 years. And we're proposing that the projects identified in the TIP be the projects that we use federal funds on during the next 4-year time period. Colorado requires state-funded projects to also be in the TIP. And there are some air quality laws and regulations that say even local, privately owned projects, if they are regionally significant, must be identified in the TIP, and that's so that air quality conformity analysis can be performed to make sure that transportation projects are not going to cause violations of the air quality standard. We are in a carbon monoxide maintenance area for 2 more years. Then we hope to be redesignated as attainment. Our last violation was in 1998. So we do have to have a conformity analysis that EPA reviews our long-range plans and our TIPs to make sure that the package of projects we're putting together do not violate the standard. The package that is in the draft TIP and is being proposed will not violate the standard, so we're okay there. We did a call for projects, started beginning last September and ended in November, asking local entities to submit projects. They were identified in your packet. We had 12 submitted. During the discussion at the TAC meeting, 6 of them were withdrawn and pulled back. And so of the remaining 6, TAC recommended 4, and that was in the table in your packet. I didn't want to do that. Yeah, that one. So TAC recommended these 4. These 6 were withdrawn for a variety of reasons. There were 2 projects here that could still be recommended. The major thoroughfares plan, the county is going to do that project in 2021. So even though there is some money left on the table in 2022, that'll be too late for them. The citywide bikeway improvements, many of these projects that were withdrawn are funded in our long-range plan, our 20-year plan, using PPRTA funds. Those are private local dollars. But for our TIP, they were then asking for federal funds. Now, in the past, this was perfectly acceptable, and we had no problem with it, and the feds had no problems with it. But between the time that we issued the call for projects and said, here's how much money is available, please submit your request, and the time that we had our TAC meeting last month, the feds have changed the rules. So rather than being fiscally constrained in total, the plan has to be fiscally constrained. If you add a project to the plan, you have to take an equal amount of dollars out of the plan on some other project. And that's the way we did it. We just did it, swapped out for totals. The feds, because of the increased emphasis on accountability in the last year or so, changed it that now they are looking at not just the total for the plan, the funding subcategories. So if we take an RTA-funded project and now fund it with TAP funds, Transportation Alternative Programs, we still have to go in and take out another project in the plan that's funded with TAP funds of an equal dollar amount. And so it's a bookkeeping, a balancing act, but rather than doing it with just 2 figures, total versus total, we now have to do it with about 18 different funding categories, and me and Jennifer and Kevin being the only ones involved in all of this, were a little lazy and tried to discourage going in and doing that. And that was identified in your memo, that one of the assumptions in funding is that we would not encourage, or initial discussion would assume that we would not swap out federal funds for private funds and swapping categories. So that was part of the discussion that was had. That led to some of the projects being withdrawn. El Paso County withdrew a trail project so that Fountain could get a trail project instead. There was enough money for one or the other. The county's project ranked slightly higher, but the county stepped aside, saying it's getting some other funds. It'll share the wealth and let the county, let the city of Fountain have some. One of the transit projects was withdrawn because they got some money in a cost overrun amendment that we just had last month. And so they said with that cost overrun, they will not ask for additional funds through this process. So those are some of the reasons why projects were withdrawn. But out of the 12 projects, that leaves 6 in the running. These 2 down here could also be recommended. The city's or the county's major thoroughfares plan, they want to do that in 2021. So even though there's some money left on the table in 2022, it'll be too late for the county's scheduling. And the other project down here was, again, a PPRTA project, now asking for federal funds. And with our discussion and the low score, it didn't, wasn't on the recommended list. Now, your option today is to either agree with TAC and recommend these 4, or you got an option of making a recommendation for these 2 down here. The ones that are withdrawn, you can't force somebody to come back to the table.
Ken, could you talk a little bit more about the Dublin Road widening and why that was shelved or pushed off?
That one is...
The top one on the not recommended.
It's funded by PPACG funds, and they were asking for federal funds. And they decided that they would rather have federal funds for some of these other projects, since the Dublin Road is funded under PPRTA. And it's just a matter of waiting for its turn in the RTA cycle.
So Ken, I have a question. Then what you're saying is the ones that were withdrawn are already funded with other dollars.
Correct.
So it's not that they're not going to get done, they're just not going to be done under this tip.
Right. And then they may have to wait a little bit longer until whatever their turn is in the RTA process. And I don't know how the RTA determines which project goes first and which project goes last in their 10-year cycle.
Julie?
Can you tell us a little bit more about the Charter Oak Ranch Road project, what that entails?
Charter Oak Ranch Road is on the west side of I-25 down in Fountain, where Highway 85, Santa Fe Avenue comes down and crosses, comes down through the city of Fountain and then crosses I-25 and goes, the equivalent of maybe about 4 blocks west, and then tees into Charter Oak Ranch Road. That turns south and then in a quarter mile turns west and goes to Fort Carson Gate 19. Fort Carson has stationed a helicopter brigade in close to Gate 19 down there, so it makes more sense for its people to enter the post at the southern end rather than at the main gate further north. And so they have built a ID card check security station there. There is and always has been an existing paved road. They will get the funds to pave that road, but the civilian road the county-owned road is Charter Oak Ranch Road that goes from I-25 over to that Gate 19. So it's about a mile and a quarter long road. There are some private homes further south on that road. There are some sand quarries, so there is traffic on there. And so this will reconstruct the road, repave it, but it's not just mill and overlay. They've actually got to do some deep reconstruction because it's so deteriorated. There is one culvert that'll have to be expanded. And they're going to put where the Santa Fe Avenue tees into Charter Oak Ranch Road. Right now, it's just a stop sign. They're going to put a roundabout at that intersection. There's a very large grocery warehouse, wholesale trucking company right there at that intersection on the south side. There's it's wholesale used car lot on the north side of the intersection. There's a landscaping company on the west side of the intersection. So there's a lot of trucking there. City of Fountain has desires to increase the industrial usage in that area. And so it's to serve the troops going in and out of Fort Carson, as well as to expand the economy in that section and portion of Fountain.
Any other questions or comments for Ken on this?
I've got a little bit more before you wrap it up. So
All right.
you thought it was going to be simple.
Did I sound like I was wrapping it up? Oh.
Well, before somebody made a motion and closed it off, I want to interject something. So this particular, all of our tips, we never close one out completely and start a brand new 4-year time period. We always have to have 4 years from a federal perspective in the tip. Our current tip is 2017 to 2022. The draft tip we're proposing, it was a 6-year tip. And I think for as long as I've been here, we've always had 6 years tip. It used to be a state requirement for a 6-year tip. That got deleted. So we have finally decided that we're going to go back to a 4-year tip to help with some of the problems with inflation and cost increases. Instead of projecting out 6 years, we only have to project out 4 years. That maybe when we do have cost overruns, they won't be as bad as if we wait, said somebody's going to get $500,000 in 6 years, and when we get there and inflation's so bad that they need $700,000. Now we only wait 4 years to figure out what that inflation is. And in our projects, if you noticed in that table, people only asked, for instance, for, I can't read that, this many federal dollars, but we inflated it out here 4 years to this time period. So we are using inflated dollars, and that was construction was based on the Colorado Construction Index. I think there were the major thoroughfares plan is just a personnel labor cost, and so we used the whatever I said in the memo, the cost index, the CPI, Consumer Price Index. So that's what we used as our inflationary factors. We do have a cost overrun policy, so when we get out to the future years, if the projects are short of money, they could come back and ask for more federal funds if we have any on the table. You'll notice that there's not any federal funds left not many left on the table. The CMAQ funds here, if we are successful in becoming an attainment area for carbon monoxide, which we would be eligible to petition for in 2019, we will no longer be eligible to receive CMAQ funds, federal CMAQ funds. So those will come off the table, and the one project that Transit got here may have to be a different source of funds found for that project, because CMAQ funds won't be here. It all depends on how long it takes us to get redesignated. We will be the first in the state to be redesignated, so we have not nobody in the state has gone through this process as to how long it takes. May or may not involve the legislature, because it involved the legislature in the past to develop a statewide plan, but now to say that we don't need one and it's going to go away, it may be a very quick and short process. So transit and all of the applicants are well aware that this money is a little iffy. But as long as we've got it right now, we'll plan on using it, and we'll see what happens when we get to 2020. It's proposed that we release this. Well, first you have to decide, and I guess that would be the first step. We need to decide what projects you're recommending out of our call for projects, and then whether you're recommending the plan be released or the tip be released for public comment. For a 30-day comment period, it would come back to you in March to see the comments were received, how they were responded to, and your final recommendation of approval or not for board action in April. Then FHWA, CDOT, and the EPA get involved, and to finish up their process by June 30th, the new draft tip would go in effect on July 1. So, two things. One, I need to know what projects you recommend. If you agree with CDOT's or TAC's recommendation, and then have it be released for the public. And then I want to talk to you about the I-25 gap. Because if you notice, it's not in the tip. And I'm going to muddy the waters, but I want to take it step by step. So if we don't mind discussing what projects out of our call for projects you want included in the tip, then we can talk about the I-25.
Okay, so you haven't muddied the waters, you just have this little pile of dirt sitting over there ready to
with no
drop
water.
in.
Oh,
Okay.
he's got a turd ready to throw.
Whatever. Aubrey?
So just to clarify, bikeway improvements was not recommended for inclusion because they're going to ask for TAP.
They recommended the others instead and decided not to recommend it, even though it could be funded out in the year 2022, because it is funded with local dollars.
So City of Colorado Springs.
City of Colorado Springs will, its share of the RTA dollars.
Okay. But it doesn't look like they voluntarily withdrew it. It's
Oh, no, they haven't withdrawn that one.
You're talking about the
Bikeway?
The bikeway, yeah. Next one up.
Phase 2.
Right there.
So that's still eligible to be recommended.
So I'm just confused about what TAC's thoughts.
TAC did not recommend it because it is funded with local dollars, and they wanted to stay away from having to amend the plan. If we fund it with federal dollars, we will have to go back into the plan and amend our plan as well.
Okay, thank you.
We have rarely amended our plan. It's a 4-year plan, and if the tip starts driving the plan, then you don't know which is your predominant or dominant document. So they did not recommend it for that reason.
Okay. Hal, and then you have...
If we can go back to Charter Ranch Road, that's a $15 million project, at least if I read this column correctly. But the federal portion's only about 20% of that. In fact, it's a little less. Mm-hmm. Most of the others, they have significantly higher federal portion, like 80%, almost all of them, including the ones that were not recommended.
Most federal matching requirements are 80%, 82.79%, federal 17.21%, local match. Charter Oak Ranch Road was hoping for and is still hoping for $10 million from the Department of Defense in what they called Defense Access Road Funds. So far, those have not been awarded. I don't think they're anticipated to be awarded until 2020, and it's up in the air whether or not they will. So if the DAR, Department of Defense Access Road funds don't come through, then the county will be on the hook for that $10 million. If they can't find the funds, or they may well come back later and say, hey, look, our $10 million Department of Defense funds fell through. We're looking for $10 million someplace else. But they only asked for the $2.5 million, saying that that's what they needed to, fill in the gap of their existing funds.
So the fact that we say that CAC agrees with this list, as with all things, it's not necessarily binding. It's also depending upon finding other sources of funding, or if they don't come through, then it comes back and asks for something else.
Or you take the project out.
Okay.
So, yes, this has to be reasonable. The TIP, just like the long-range plan, has to, it's not a wish list. You have to have a reasonable expectation that the funds are going to be available. So they have, because Fort Carson has used access road funds in the past to build Bradley Road out. Well, I guess it was the Air Force out to Schriever Air Force Base. So there's an expectation that those roads will come through. If they don't, then yes, either the project has to come out or an alternate source of funds has to go in.
Thank you.
Okay, we're coming, Michelle had a question or comment?
No, I was going to make a motion.
Oh, you're going to make a motion. All
Yeah,
right, so then we can
sorry,
discuss the motion.
We can do that. So I move that we accept the TAC recommendation as presented, and that we recommend the TIP for release for public comment.
Do we have a second? Juliet? Further discussion on this? Right.
I have some further discussion.
Oh, you have some further.
Well, I don't want to sneak.
Exactly. No.
I don't want to sneak one past you, and that's the I-25 gap.
Well, how does that relate to the TIP as
Well,
we've got it here? Because
it was not in the draft TIP you have because CDOT has not finished their environmental assessment and their NEPA study to define and decide what the project is. Had a conference call yesterday with FHWA, CDOT Region 1 in Denver, Dr. Cog, us, CDOT Region 2, and some other people that are interested. The feds are pushing as rapidly as possible to get the I-25 gap into our plans and TIPs. We approved it and amended our plan last October and put it in our plan. We never put it in the TIP. Our TIP will not be effective until 1 July. So if we put it in the plan, it won't do the I-25 gap project any good until 1 July. They're looking at possibly having the environmental assessment done in May. Then there would be a sitting there doing nothing until our new TIP came into effect, if it were in our document. So we had this discussion yesterday. How can we put something in Dr. Cog's long-range plan and TIP, because they've not put it in the plan yet? How can we put it in our TIP if they haven't finished the analysis and decided for sure what the project is? Our portion is only a 2.5 mile portion of the entire document, so our TIP will only reflect that portion. Dr. Cog's TIP will reflect the other 16 miles from Douglas County line up to Castle Rock. So the discussion yesterday is what will the feds accept? What's the wording of the two documents? And as of yet, I do not have an official request from CDOT, this is their project, as to what they're requesting. But the feds want it in our current TIP, and they want it amended by the board in March. That'll be the middle of our comment period for the draft TIP. So based on the discussion yesterday, let's see if I get it right.
Up one, I think.
Okay. This is something that I just drafted during the phone call yesterday afternoon that we were having. This is almost the language out of our plan. In our plan, it says construction of northbound and southbound managed lanes. Now, there's a lot of pushback here in El Paso County about managed lanes. It's more accepted in Douglas County. So our description, which is only 2 lanes, might be different. Some of the analyses that CDOT is looking at in their development of what the project could be or should be is the managed lanes wouldn't start until Douglas County anyway, north of the county line interchange. So we would only have general purpose lanes in El Paso County. But that hasn't been decided yet. So playing a semantics game with the feds, they said, if you don't say what you're doing, next they're getting very loose on their requirement to have a proper description of a project. If you're just silent on whether it's going to be managed lanes or general purpose lanes, they're willing to accept that to get it into the TIP amendment and approved in March. In our plan, it's a $38 million cost. In the discussion yesterday, they were looking at our portion being closer to $50 million, 38 million versus 50 million. And they said, well, that's close enough to not be inconsistent. The requirement is that your projects in the TIP must be consistent with the projects in the plan. That's the federal language of the regulation. So for the sake of not holding up the I-25 gap, they're willing to allow us to drop the word managed out of here, which means it could be managed, it could be general purpose, once the final decision is made in May or June. And based on whatever they decide is the final project, that cost is going to change. So they will come back with a TIP amendment, probably after July 1 for our new TIP, and they will say what these lanes are going to be, and they will say what this is going to be. There's a draft letter that's floating around, but so far they haven't submitted it. It identifies 2 sound walls somewhere along that 18-mile stretch and X number of culverts and wildlife crossings and things like that, but just hasn't gotten to us officially. So what I want to propose to you is to add something very close to this language to the draft TIP to take to the board for release to the public. So when it goes out to the public, this is there, and it's not taken in a comment at the end of the public, and the public never sees it and never hears about it. I'd like to get it in there at the beginning of the public involvement period. And also, because it's related to the TIP amendment that they want, I want to go to the board and ask them in 2 weeks to release a TIP amendment for public comment to add the I-25 gap to our current TIP.
That includes that on this table.
Include that in that table, as well as a standalone TIP amendment of the current TIP that would go out for a public comment, and it would come back to you next month for final recommendation of approval or not approval of the I-25 gap project. And we will, by that time, I hope, since my deadline for writing memos and submitting it for the board is Friday, I hope CDOT has their final language identified that would be included, because we can't do anything without CDOT requesting it. It's their project. But the feds are really pushing it, so trying to do the balancing act of not having any bureaucratic delay for the project, but at the same token, not putting in something that presupposes the outcome of the environmental studies. They're looking at, I say, as the environmental analysis being done in May. The construction and everything is guaranteed to start 1 November, may even start in August, if they can get everything done. But they still have to come up with the money. We don't get the infra grant until late spring. It's announced if who the winners are of the infra grant contest. If we don't get the money, then we'll be short $65 million, and a different plan will have to be made. But nobody wants to kill the project.
How many miles again are in El Paso?
It's between 2.5, depends on whether you measure from the bridge to bridge or ramp to ramp or something like that. I think at max it's 2.5.
Tamara?
Oh,
She was,
that's fine.
just hit me.
You want us to recommend this without specifying managed or general purpose land?
Correct.
Is that going out to the public for public comment?
Yes.
I'm struggling with that because, as you mentioned earlier, the general public has issue with the managed land. So basically, we're putting out something and asking them to comment on it when we're not stating specifically if this will be managed land or general purpose. Can you help me to understand how we're going to get the appropriate comments from the public without giving
CDOT is conducting 8 public meetings. There's one today, there was one yesterday, between those 2 days and the rest of February on the I-25 gap. And they are scattered at different days, different times, different locations in Colorado Springs and Monument. And what I want to do is to use the comments and the input that they receive for our public comment, because trying to put together a public involvement campaign at the last minute is quite hard.
Could we say, could we, in your release to public, for public comment, can you state that this could be a managed or a general purpose, so that people know it could still be either way, and that it's not, because when I just hear lanes, I think it's general purpose. If I hear managed lanes, then I know it's managed, but I don't differentiate between general purpose and lanes, right? General purpose lanes and lanes. So I think it would be unfair for me, for anyone to expect me to make any comment if I don't have all the information.
Okay.
So I think that's something. And then the second thing is, I believe design has already started, correct? Or is this a design build project if we're doing construction in August?
I am supposed to have a meeting. They are close to 30% completed on design.
Okay, so the environmental study is not complete, but the design has started?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
They are doing as much as possible concurrently rather than serially, and that's why it's gone from a normal minimum of a 5-year process. They're getting it down to a 2-year process. They have not finished the PEL, and they've kind of put it on the back burner and moved ahead with an environmental assessment of this gap portion, even though the full I-25 PEL goes all the way up to 470. So they are trying to respond to the public's desire for immediate action and do it within the rules and regulations of the environmental process and the approval process.
Can I ask one more follow-up?
Oh, sure.
So are you aware, who's the owner of this I-25 gap widening?
CDOT.
CDOT. So with that, El Paso County, our region is providing money. I guess I'd be curious to know, is it design bid build or a design build? Because obviously the two different deliveries going to.
They are using, it's a modification of the design build. CMGC, where they have already hired the contractor, and he is employed by CDOT and is working on this. And it's like design build, but it's the same contractor that's doing the designing, doing the building, and because he is the contractor, he knows the bottlenecks and the shortcuts to speed things up. And I don't think CDOT has used it very often, but apparently it's a well-known type.
On that. So if it's CMGC, the CDOT will hire the designer and the contractor. So CDOT has more input into design versus the design build.
Okay.
So we've already hired a contractor for that portion of the leg, and then so we've hired
I don't know.
Okay. I guess I just have so many questions on why we're being asked to put this, approve this or recommend this late last minute.
Well, there's, CDOT is concerned about going out with this in our plans and tips before the PEL and the environmental process is complete. They do not want to publish a document that presupposes the outcome, that we are going to do managed lanes, that we are not going to do managed lanes. That's why they don't want to say, get very specific about what's actually in the tip. And the feds, by their own rules, cannot presuppose the outcome. So
I understand there's a lot of pressure to expedite things when, to me, it's not at a point for a good decision to be made. I think that's the hard part, and this is my personal opinion, is because the feds want things pushed and CDOT's trying to meet those deadlines, then we're pushing the public to make a decision on something that they're not giving complete information. I just want to speak of that. I think as individuals, we can all make our own decisions on how we want to vote, but I just want to speak of that. I think that is very difficult to ask of me in this meeting as well as a public member to provide feedback. I will stop my question.
No, your concern is very valid, and it was expressed by several people in the telephone discussion yesterday, at CDOT people.
Let me make sure I understand, because I'm a simple man, and I need small words.
Okay.
What we're asking, what you're asking, or what is being asked as a result of a meeting yesterday, a telephone conference, is that we put something in the tip that speaks to our commitment to the I-25 widening. Correct?
Okay.
Okay. So it's there. And the public is going to be asked to approve its position in the tip. They are not, at this point, being asked to agree ultimately to do the funding because, as Tamara's pointed out, there is a huge discussion about what really people voted for when they voted in April?
November.
The 25 million.
I'm sorry, I said I'm a simple man, and I was going to show that here real quickly. So I think I'm a little concerned about, I think what you're suggesting, Tamara, to me is a right way to go, but it may fuzzy things up when we're talking to the feds, because I spent 26 years on the other side. And in the dark world of the federal government, if we start tweaking with something they've sort of said, we're going to agree to that and let's keep moving forward, we could end up with this thing turning into a big nightmare. That's just my observation on that particular point. Aubrey?
So that I can, vote appropriately, how is public comment incorporated? So how much of a weight does it have on the ultimate outcome of the tip?
It all depends on the comment. We will receive and recognize the comments that we've received, and they will be included as an appendix in the document, and the response to them will also be identified. So simply the fact that somebody says, I'm opposed to tolling, at this point, for what we're asking right now, we have not determined that it's going to be a tolling road. We have not determined that it's going to be a general purpose lane in El Paso County or Douglas County. So, yes, it is very hazy and it is unclear, ambiguous, and I think in the press release and the documentation that goes out outside of the tip, that has to be explained, that both options and others are on the table. Nothing at this point has been precluded. But that can't be put in the legal document from the federal standpoint. If we don't put it in, the option is we kill the I-25 gap.
Now, what's the matter?
I don't think I'd vote for that.
It has to be in our tip and our plan. We've already got it in the plan. Has to be in the tip. It has to be in Dr. Cog's plan and tip. They're going through the process now of putting their portion into their tip. They don't even have it in their plan yet. Has not been a priority in the Dr. Cog region.
Okay, now let me point out, we are discussing outside of the range of the motion. So somewhere along here, we need an amendment to the motion that would incorporate or not incorporate language about I-25 widening in the tip that is being proposed to go public. I'm going to look at it, am I wrong? In what? Separate motion? So,
Yeah, that's
but
what I was like, why don't we vote
we
on
have to
this
do
one
that
and
first. But we would have to vote on that first?
Can I?
Oh, sure.
You made a motion to recommend 4 projects that were conducted under our Powerful Projects,
Right.
and to then release that out for the public. If you don't wish to make a recommendation about the I-25 gap, I will go ahead and proceed, and at the board, I will ask the board to put it in, with or without you, but I did not want to blindside you. I wanted to have the discussion here. So if you're not comfortable making the recommendation, you could make the recommendation that it not go in because it is too ambiguous.
Okay, Ellen?
I'm just curious, could I ask about language? I know language is important, how we word anything that we approved or recommended or did not recommend to the board would be important.
Let me offer a suggestion. Let me start by saying to the maker of the motion, if she would recast the motion to focus solely on the 4 projects and not releasing the whole tip yet, then we can come back and decide whether we add or not add and what we add about I-25. Then we have a motion with regard to making the tip with the elements that we would have approved or not approved placed out for public comment. Does that make sense? Would you amend or withdraw your motion and rephrase it as solely an approval of the TAC recommendation for the projects to be included in the tip?
So first question I have is, how does adding this, or does it at all, impact the call for projects list that we're trying to decide on? Will it have any impact
No.
on, it's going to end up, we're going to have to come back and kick one of these out to put this in?
No, it would be a new 5th project.
Okay.
So right now we have your initial motion, which was seconded. So
Right. So, sorry, I'm kind of struggling with what exactly we're talking about here. So we've got an existing tip, the 17 to 22, that we need to add this something for the I-25 gap to, right?
I would like to add something
Okay.
to it, but it was not in your packet, so that is all brand new out of the blue.
Right. Now, I'm trying to summarize where we are so that I understand what's going on. So we need to add something to the 17 to 22 tip. We need to add the same 25 gap thing to the 19 to 22 tip.
Correct.
Right? Okay. And we need to deal with the 4 projects that need to be put into the 19 to 22 tip. And we need to get the 19 to 22 tip released to the public for comment.
That's a good sum.
Thank you.
Summary.
Bottom line here. So, because it's all, other than the 17 to 22 tip piece, related, I'd rather have a single motion that deals with everything going together than pull it out in parts and pieces. But
she's for comprehensive immigration reform.
Well, you can either withdraw it, or we can vote it down and then start over
Yeah.
again.
Start all over again. All right, do you want to, shall we proceed with what we have right now, which does not speak to I-25?
no, I think we need to withdraw it and start from scratch,
Okay.
which I will do.
I'm sorry?
Is the tax of this and adding this is
No, this conversation just happened
This is-
yesterday, so they
this-
haven't even heard it.
This did not go to TAC. I did discuss what we proposed to do, and Brian Vituli in the audience is the TAC chair, We propose to email out this information to them for the TIP amendment and ask them if anybody has concerns about releasing it for a public involvement period to come back for committee recommendation and board approval in March. Now, you don't have to act on TIP amendment today because that's not on your agenda. But I did not want to skip right past you without saying something, and especially since it's going to show up in the draft, well, should show up as well in the draft TIP. So you don't have to make a recommendation on the TIP amendment,
Which TIP amendment?
the 2017-2022 TIP.
We can ignore that, but we still have to put this in the 19 to 22.
I would like you to put it into
We
the,
don't need to put in the 17 to 22.
since it was not on your agenda.
Well, the whole I-25 gap, adding it to anything wasn't even on the agenda.
Well,
so
yeah, but
I'm just trying to clarify.
Right. Well, the 2019 to 2022 TIP draft release to the public is in your agenda. The question is, which projects do you want to recommend? You'd already said go with what TAC recommended, those 4. My question is, are you comfortable adding the I-25 gap to that? It's not part of the competitive call for projects.
Right.
This is something that just popped up yesterday.
So I completely understand your concern, Tamara, and I agree with it. However, having also worked for the government for a great many years, we'd be foolish to not put something out there, even ambiguous as it is, and at least make the public aware that we're trying to get this done because the whole dang public is not happy with that section of the roadway and clamoring for it to be repaired and fixed in some way. So it's not pretty, but it's better than nothing. So, I would suggest that we look at adding this draft language into the 19 to 22 TIP, along with the 4 projects, and then releasing the TIP to the public.
So is that your motion?
That would be my motion, yes.
Do we have a second?
Seconded.
Okay, we have motion and a second. Okay, John?
Which is worse, leaving it blank and then having public scrutiny say, why is it left blank? And that's what I hear you saying. Or going ahead with the projects minus this, you're going to present it to PPACG committee anyway.
It will come back for final comment. If we don't do anything, the concern is if we wait until July and then go through the process after the final decision is made by CDOT, that we will delay the project. Maybe lose a construction season this year and get delayed until next year.
Could we put in that area rather than which kind of lane it is pending CDOT input?
From a federal standpoint, they want a description. They don't want a pending project or an unknown project. So that's why. So that's why they're willing to let us just remove the word managed and don't define whether it's managed or general purpose.
So that passes, and we get it in on the deadline. When does the public have the input between the two? Because that's been all over the papers for a long time. When do they have input?
They will have input for our TIP amendment process, which they can certainly say they want toll lanes or don't want toll lanes. At the same time, the feds or CDOT is still moving forward with its environmental assessment, and they won't complete that until about May. So they are continuing to take comment. Right.
Well, let me add to that too, and I can't remember whether it was Jessica or Bethany sent out a CDOT schedule, which you should have received by email. And for example, up in my neighborhood, there is a meeting Monday night that is a listening session. And there was some publicity. I saw some media reports this morning about a meeting out at the Penrose House yesterday on this subject by CDOT. So they have about 8 or 9 meetings scheduled from here up. And I would encourage you to take a look at that schedule, and if you can, at least go be a fly on the wall and see what the public is saying and whether, but for those of you who are relatively new to this process, when we did this 4 years ago, the public comments are captured very voluminously. And so when we come around in March, you said, when this comes back to us in March, we will have another shot at this. And the public comments will be part of the package that we will be looking at in March to vote on. So this is not a one-shot deal. I've let the conversation go beyond our scheduled time simply because the I-25 thing was new information and we needed to try to massage that. But I'd like to reach some sort of position on what we think the board should be doing, because that's what they're looking for, something from us. So we do have a motion and a second to add the I-25 language as Ken has laid it out, and forward that to it's 2019 to 2022 tip, and forward that to the board and recommending their approval. So is there, I'm sorry?
So add to the 2019 to 2022 tip the 4 projects as recommended by the TAC, along with the language that Ken proposes for the I-25 widening project, and release the 19 to 22 tip for public comment.
Okay.
And can you mention that during this project public process, CDOT is making aware that it can be managed or unmanaged money, correct?
They are still seeking input on that, correct, yes.
Because I'm going to go make sure.
There's one tonight.
And I've been there, I've been to the past ones, and it was discussed, but at that time, it seemed like it was managed. But I don't know when, I think it was late last year, and it was basically managed, and now I'm hearing unmanaged. That's why I'm just really confused, but if that's going to be very clear, and the information is going to be public on a regular basis, then I would love for this project to go forward, and I agree with you, you know, and that I understand, I've never worked for the federal government, but I do understand the pressure, and sometimes you have to circumvent your normal process. I just want to make sure we're all aware that we are circumventing some of the normal process that we are supposed to follow.
Well, I'm going to look at Bethany and make sure that when we do the minutes, that we include at least one sentence that expresses the concern of members of the CAC that we want to make sure the public understands that the lanes could be managed or general purpose. Okay, Hal, last.
I'm sorry, but I thought I heard you say that the portion in El Paso County would not be managed.
That is one proposal that CDOT is studying, but the final decision has not been made.
El Paso County is
That's
pushing
what I-
back on it heavily, but
Well, I certainly understand that.
Yeah.
I misheard. The second thing, in my opinion, is that you can be guaranteed you're going to get discussion about managed versus non-managed, regardless of what you say.
That'll be
Oh, yeah.
the topic.
Oh, yeah.
well, and there's been enough exposure in the public
Sure.
already that it won't slide by.
And Ken, I'm sorry, one final thing. Our portion includes expanding the bridge, correct, up on County Line Road. That's where the money is.
I don't believe they're going to expand that bridge
Which,
at this time.
I
which
thought we
bridge?
already had 3 lanes up to the top and down from the.
Well, there's a
No.
climbing lane.
No,
Yeah,
the third lane
I count that the
ends
third
just,
lane.
the third lane ends as you exit to County Line.
So
And
we're
it's only northbound.
Okay.
Yeah, that's true.
My understanding of the concept is that they would add a third through lane and still have a climbing lane.
So it isn't the bridge work, it's that extra money.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
we don't have to lengthen the bridge to fit in that third,
That was my assumption.
They do for many of the bridges. I don't know. I remember somebody asking that question. I don't remember the answer, but I think for at least under one concept of what they're doing, they did not have to, or it would be done later, as right now. And so I'm not sure about that.
Let me caution us in trying to design the project from here.
I was trying to understand where 50
All right.
million came
Yeah,
from.
we don't need to.
Pardon?
I was trying to understand where 50 million came from, because that was an increase over the 30.
Right.
Yeah, we had 38 in our plan.
That's all. I was just trying.
Okay.
All right.
And Kevin, and this will be the last comment, I'd like to,
Point of order, I came in the middle of that. Is this on? I came in the middle of the discussion. I want to know if the board chair will allow me to vote.
the board chair will allow you to vote? Me, I'm not the board.
I don't know, well, okay, the committee chair.
I'm going to allow you to vote.
Okay, I just want to, I
We've
don't want anybody to, thank you.
We've covered it. There's blood on the floor. We're doing
I
well.
told you he was going to throw a turd.
Okay. All right, we have a motion and a second. If there's no further discussion, please. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Hearing none, thank you all very much. Ken, thank you very much. Oh,
Okay, wait.
Michelle.
So we kind of skipped over the 17 to 22 tip issue in adding the I-25 piece to it. What is your concern or not, or why are you wanting to add it, and what happens if we don't add it? Is there, other than, so the 19 to 22 tip starts in July of this year.
Right.
So your concern is that if it's not in the 17 to 22 tip, we have a several-month gap between
That there
approved projects.
could be a delay in the gap process because it's not in an approved
Okay.
current tip.
So if we're going to put it in the 19 to 22, we need to add it to the 17 to 22.
Yes, and
Okay.
now, that's not on your agenda, but I wanted you to be aware of it, because what I would propose to do is I will take it to the board, ask it to be released for public comment, to come back through you in February for a final recommendation, and I will tell the board that TAC did not see it, although we emailed them and sought individual responses, and here's the concerns. And certainly you have expressed your concerns today, and I would use those same concerns to say it was discussed here, but it was not on the agenda, so there is no official recommendation from the committee.
And I also intend to be present at the board meeting, so I can reinforce what Ken's saying from your perspective.
So I guess my question is there any good reason to make a motion to recommend that to the board, or do we just wait until it comes back in February? We know it's coming.
I'm not inclined to step outside the agenda.
Okay, fine.
And that would be
Make sure we didn't skip over it and forget it.
my concern is balancing the committee protocol with not saying anything and just going to them, and then you hearing about it after the fact.
No, and I appreciate that. I just didn't want to, I separated the two pieces out, and I
Right.
wanted to make sure we were clear on what was going on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ken.
And it's the board that gets the big bucks anyway to try to make these decisions.
Indeed.
Ken, I think you can sit down.
Thanks,
Thank you very
Ken.
much. Bethany, do you have anything to report on Hyperloop?
They're not coming.
Okay. All right, so we will table the Hyperloop technology.
They had all the pictures. I know.
I know, I was really looking forward to that.
I was too.
Yeah.
Wanted to see the marketing guys coming.
All right.
All right.
Ms. Nellinger is not, sir, you are,
Just it's interesting that they're late.
Nice.
yeah, no, we were talking, when you came in a little late, you'd already missed several snide remarks that we made about him. All right. Item 5B is the election of officers for 2018. And because I am a candidate, I have asked Jessica to kind of guide this discussion and the process. And you have the recommendation of the committee that was chaired by Jen, and I'm sorry that she's not here. I didn't hear that she wasn't going to make it. So we have two of her committee members, Tamara and Courtney, who may be able to speak to it. But Jessica, would you kind of take us by the hand?
Real quick, here is your short summary. The nominating subcommittee was Jen Nellinger, Tamara Dippner, and Courtney Stone. They met to create the slate of officers, and they are recommending for 2018 that Michelle Day be chair, that Jim Moore be first vice chair, and that second vice chair be Sharon Brown. Currently, Jim Moore is our chair. Our first vice chair is Kevin Walker, and our second vice chair is Michelle Day. They are both serving their first term and eligible for a second term. You'll see that beneath it there are the official bylaws of the Community Advisory Committee. And I would like to pass it over to Courtney or Tamara if they have anything they'd like to add.
So Jen emailed Courtney and I since she wasn't able to be here and asked us to read a letter, so I will read a letter from Jen.
Could you get a microphone, please, so we can all?
Yep. Is that better?
Yes, that's much better.
To my fellow CAC members, unfortunately, I'm unable to attend our meeting today due to a Civil Air Patrol course I need to take being offered in Texas. I tried to fly out after our meeting but found nothing available. I apologize. On behalf of my fellow nominating committee members, Tamara and Courtney, I wanted to briefly express our rationale for the recommended slate. We are blessed with a deep bench of experienced leadership in our CAC group. While it is easy, more expedient to stick with known entities, we believe it is best to mentor and encourage a newer chair group reflecting the welcome influx of new voices on our committee. And in the spirit of mentorship, include a seasoned voice of experience to help our recommended new chair learn the ropes and cover when needed. With these thoughts, we recommend Michelle Day as chair, Jim Moore as first vice chair, and Sharon Brown for second vice chair. Our sincere thanks to both Jim Moore and Kevin Walker for their years of service to the committee as chair and vice chairs. Your ability to run the meetings efficiently, cover the board meetings in such detailed and documented fashion for us, and collegially engage the group is greatly appreciated. We are grateful. It is the nominating committee's hope you will support this slate in the spirit it was intended and give this new group your full support, engaged interest, and express the voice of your particular part of this wonderful community. Respectfully, Jen Nellinger.
I can't pronounce it either.
Okay.
And I will say that you do have three proposals before you: to accept the slate as proposed, to accept an amended slate, or to vote on each position individually. So that becomes any more discussion on it or questions?
Having served in public office for 8 years, I would really like to see the current chair stay. I think the continuity of the position, and then, no offense to Michelle.
I'll take it.
I would love to have her go in as second, and then if people would still want me, I would go in. I mean, as the first vice chair, and then I would go in as second vice chair. But I think it's for continuity, and I know how tough it is, just having 1 year experience. I think that it needs to go on. He needs to continue on as the chair. So I would recommend that change. Jim Moore as chair. We put Michelle in as first vice chair, and then I guess myself as second vice chair to make that change.
Do we have a second? Motion fails for,
No.
Okay.
Motion to accept the slate of the
Okay.
Well, still got to vote on her motion first.
So
Well, it failed because of no
it
second.
fails because of lack of second. Is there another motion? Say that again.
I make a motion that we accept the slate of the nominating committee.
Is there a second?
I second that.
Okay. Is there any discussion? Kevin?
Yeah, I just want to let everybody know that I did put my name in I self-nominated myself, and that still stands. So I was willing to accept whatever position was open. So.
Is there any other discussion? There is a motion on the floor to accept the slate as proposed by the nominating committee. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say aye. Aye. Okay. That motion passes. Everyone but one. And our new chair will be Michelle, our first vice chair will be Jim, and our second vice chair will be Sharon.
Now, under the bylaws, does Michelle take over now in the meeting?
She takes over at the beginning of next meeting.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
I got a little momentum here. Yeah. Okay, let me please acknowledge the work of the nominating committee. I appreciate it very much, and I look forward to working with Michelle in the year ahead. Next item on the agenda is item 6A, legislative update. And once again, we will ask Jessica to step to the microphone and explain it.
But I'm coming to the front so I can actually look at the sheet while I'm doing it. As you all know, the PPACG Legislative Subcommittee of the Board reviews legislation as it comes forward each year. This year we are very lucky that we also have a lobbyist, the Furman Group, who is assisting us in being our on-the-ground feet at the Capitol. At the point when I made this, which has changed since then, we had only looked at 3 different bills. We had looked at Senate Bill 1801, Transportation Infrastructure Funding. Upon review of it, the Legislative Committee is requesting that we please monitor it. There were several issues with it raised through our Chamber of Commerce and through several of our other agencies that brought up that some of the current phrasings in it may not be addressing the actual needs of our community. Senate Bill 1802 is a financing rural broadband deployment, which after long discussion by our board, by our Legislative Committee, when I sent this out, they were saying support. Right now, they have actually recommended opposing unless amended. The original support position was taken with the understanding that an amendment was actually part of the proposed language, which it wasn't. And the current language of the bill says that if any of the census block grants requesting funding for broadband have any federal grants or funding, they are ineligible. That would make it impossible for anyone in Colorado to use that funding. And so we've switched that to oppose without amendment. You'll also see that we have House Bill 1129, which is a highway building and maintenance fund, which is almost identical to Senate Bill 1. You got the little comparison of them in your packet that talks about they're very similar. They are 1119, we are also currently, the Legislative Committee is also suggesting we monitor for a very similar reason to Senate Bill 1. They both are looking like there's going to be a complex number of issues that, my dead battery, will all be playing a role. Right now, we also have on our list, but have not yet discussed, Senate Bill 104, which is a federal funds for rural broadband deployment, which will be coming up along that same line because so many of PPACG's members are rural. And there have been several bills that we may or may not be reviewing for the Area Agency on Aging that will influence our programs. Thus far, the bills that were proposed will not influence us directly, so we have taken them off of our monitor or opinion list, but that may change at any minute. All of these comments are currently suggestions by the Legislative Committee until the Board of Directors makes a vote on the 14th. Does anyone have any additional comments they would like us to present to the Board regarding any of this legislation?
Who's the lobbyist?
Lauren Furman with the Furman Group, who for many years has served with the Colorado Association of Commerce and Industry, our state chamber.
Any other comments?
You
I very much appreciated your analysis and agreed. It's interesting. The politics of the current age are very interesting. So we'll leave it at that.
Just so you guys know, if you are interested in knowing what we're monitoring, that legislative tracking page link that was in your packet will always be accurate. So if you ever want to, hey, what's changed, what's shifted, if you click that link, it will always give you the most updated information from the Legislative Committee, from our lobbyist, when it's going to be heard next, these kind of things, and we'll provide you with any bills that we have taken on since then. So you guys don't have to wait for me to send you an email and be all slow.
Can you bookmark it?
Be proactive.
I bookmarked it.
Okay.
And Jessica, can I ask a
Courtney?
question? I think last legislative session we were given the time, so if we wanted to pop in and listen to the legislative committee, we could. Is that an ongoing invitation?
That is indeed. So if anybody is ever interested in hearing the discussion or wants to chime in, because there's a bill you think PPACG should care about, 4 o'clock every single Monday, we either meet upstairs in the PPACG small conference room, or we have a dial-in number, which Bethany or I will email to everyone so you have the option of dialing in, because it's a little bit easier. We also have great participation this year from our board, which has resulted in a much easier process than we had last year. I didn't say that out loud.
Thank you very much. Any general comments, anything from members of the committee for just general announcements that you would like to make between now and our next meeting at the end of February? Yes, sir.
Kono has a new CEO. We accepted Diane Lotion as our CEO, and Dave Bunger will be, I don't want to say stepping aside, but he's retiring as much as Dave can retire.
He claims.
Yeah, he claims. So, but the day-to-day operations will turn over to her, and I think that's effective, the end of February.
Yeah.
February 26th. So just so you know, Dave Munger is still engaged with Kono, but the day-to-day operations will be handled by Diane. And I have a press release if you want it for the minutes, or...
Could you email it to me as well?
Yes. Okay.
Okay. Is that it, Tim?
Yep.
Okay, Courtney?
I just was gonna remind you guys about our Art of Accessibility event this Friday at the Independence Center. So if you are free from 5 to 8 to stop by, there's an art gallery, but mainly for your purposes, the city and county's ADA coordinators will be there and sort of walking through funding processes for accessibility improvements and kind of walking through that. Plus, there's free chocolate, and that is incredible art by people with disabilities, but for your purposes.
Free chocolate.
Yeah, free chocolate.
Okay, we had another hand up. Yes, ma'am. Terry.
Terry Hayes, Town Monument. It's my first event. I just came for an event today, so first meeting. I just, not to beleaguer I-25, but I just want to have everybody watch their information that comes in from El Paso County, because the county commissioners have announced that they are going to be doing their own series of meetings. And the reason for that is you are exactly right, that the meetings that CDOT holds are more this way than this way. So they want to be able to control the conversation. So they're in the point of setting those up right now. So please, please, please listen for those and then put them out to your channel, because those are going to be more of a true conversation. And that's all I'm going to say.
Jessica.
I'm going to chime in. So if the board releases for public comment the new tip, the 2019 to 2022, that will be sent to all of you, and I will beg you all to please share it out as widely as possible. That is how we get public comment, and that is a huge portion of how I intend to abuse all of you regularly. You are our community voice, so help make sure that the community has a voice. In addition to that, the Area Agency on Aging is excited that they're going to have several upcoming events. The Medicare 101 series returns to help people of Medicare age. Our next one is February 26th. Social Security 101 to teach people who are coming up on retirement age is March 1st. And then we'll also be doing our Retirement 101 series, which is a month of Tuesday evening classes in partnership with ENT to train people how to retire safely, how to plan for things. And those will all be coming out, and you'll all get this lovely, incredibly huge email from me with the details and all the flyers and all the information. And if you're not already, we do share things like CDOT listening tours, El Paso County Commissioner listening tours. Anytime people are out talking, we share those on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. So please make sure you are helping us share these things.
Okay, I would just, I have an announcement and a comment with regard to the I-25. The city, or not, the county commissioners, I have heard express very forcefully that we need to recognize the real benefit for the widening for I-25 near term is primarily from El Paso County. Douglas County already benefits from the widening that took place Castle Rock North. And so what we need to do is really make sure that folks are engaged. And to the extent that we have contacts, I would just foot stomp for Jessica's request that we do make sure we use whatever it is, our email lists, our Facebook, Twitter, tweet, whatever, Snapchat, whatever's out there. I don't know. One of you can go through the catalog and let everybody else know. I guess Facebook for kids too. I guess that's the new one. Anyway, never mind. Don't mean to go there. I would just like to let everybody know, and this may sound dumb by the time I get done with it, but Chinese New Year is going to be observed as it is every year at the City Auditorium on the 10th of February. And there is a local group called the Taiko Society, which I've been involved with for 5 years, and we will be performing at 12:30 and at 2:30. But the event is very interesting for a variety of things. I think it starts about 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning, goes until about 3 in the afternoon. And one of the really fun things is a lion dance group that comes down from Denver, and they are phenomenal. And it's like teenagers and little kids, and they just go nuts. So if you don't have anything else on your mind, and watch the Go section, because it'll have more exact details about what's going to happen. So, okay, items for the next CAC meeting. We will be joined, I think, for the first time by the new executive director, I would hope.
That is the plan.
Okay. So, if you have not seen it, I will ask that we send out his brief biography one more time when we send out the packet. So we don't need to do it right away, but I think he's going to be a very interesting and very energetic executive director for the Council of Governments. Jennifer, do you have any idea of when we're going to start working the next step on the long-range plan, or are we waiting until Mr. Gunning's in place?
No, we're not waiting. So I am going to bring a small area forecast update. That's the main thing I've been working on, and then I don't know if I think Ken will present the scoring criteria items, so we'll have some good discussion next month.
Okay, so that could be on there. And we'll probably have a tip amendment, as we just heard earlier, so stand by for more discussion. Okay, meeting schedule is attached. Our next meeting is the 28th of February. So we will see you then, and anything, yes, John.
I've been here a short time, but I want to thank you for your leadership and your service. All I'm going to see is two people switch places.
Well, I'll move over here. She's shy. You can bet.
On the meeting on the 28th, it has the time as 2.
Yeah.
No, that's
when the conference room begins, reserved, so we have time to set up. The meeting does begin at 3.
yeah.
That's because, okay.
So we don't get somebody. No, we will not be meeting at 2 o'clock. You'll get an agenda that says 3 or something like that. Okay.
Curious, how did the Hyperloop people get on the agenda? Aren't they going to be on it again?
Well,
they reached out, or they were at a presentation from Pueblo's COG, and someone from our TAC said it would be a good idea to get here. So we tried to. They came to our TAC meeting. They said they would be here to get our board meeting, but we just didn't show.
Train never left the station.
But I'll reach out to them again and see. But I don't think next month.
They had a magnetic failure.
I'm interested.
No idea.
Jennifer?
So it's kind of a suboptimal solution, but the video of the TAC meeting is available on our YouTube if you really want to watch it. Their presentation soon.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, as I mentioned to somebody before the meeting today, my concern is I feel like light rail is a 20th century solution to a 21st century problem. And by the time light rail gets resolved, I mean, this is a disruptive technology if it comes into play. I'd love to hear a lot more about it from all sides. So, okay, anything else? Questions, comments, general observations for the good of the cause? Hearing none. We're adjourned.
Great. Now you need a new gavel.
Name tag.
Yeah.
Whiteout works.
Go dig out my old first. I was a first vice chair.
I'm just gonna.
Okay. First, I was.
Keep the little paper ones in between.
You don't keep them?
I'm sorry to tell you that we do not hold on to them to treasure them forever.
Because I was first vice chair to Jen Nellinger. Jen Knellinger.
Well, I'm glad that you're staying on.
No, well, and you know what nobody has thought about, I can run for chair again next year. I'm thinking about it anyway.